Zodadiuk kod WH40K Varnabazus Balk. Silsadwas. Not to mock your in our previous council, I will deliver a lecture on the subject of the influence of warp storms in chrono displacement on the eve of the next periapsis of Venchai at the conference hall of the Russeler Arcanum in the presence of the Synod of the Archivists Savants of Tarnor. I will speak not only about my conclusions and findings, but also on the processes used on the regulation of data and their analysis. I will also bring all relevant documentation to submit for review by the Synod and, if approved, for subsequent archival. And, as previously agreed, the amount of souls in exchange for the raw materials and expertise in the crafting of the Staff of Change. Furthermore, by the Chief Archivist Savant's request, I added an attachment on this message with a brief overview of the subject to be presented. May the Changer of Ways grant thee wisdom.
Of the many mysteries of the warp, few are probably given the proper attention as the warp storms. Information about these incidents, which are both regions and events of warp space, is scarce beyond what is already well established. Warp storms are a danger for warp navigation, and the best and safest course of action is to wait for the storm to dissipate. Any attempt to force its way out of a warp storm will cause the ship's destruction, as the powerful psychic gale winds of the storm will tear any void ship apart. Attempting to jump back into normal space will almost have the same effect. And in a few rare cases, some ships have been propelled back into the past or into the future in periods that range from a few years to millennia. It was these last occurrences, the time jumps, that have drawn my interest in the warp storms. But first, a little introduction of contextual information. As it is commonly known, every emotion and every emotionally charged thought will have its final resting place inside the warp. It does not matter how insignificant or how intense that emotion is, it will always go into the warp. Therefore, after trillions upon trillions of sentient beings generating all kinds of emotions throughout the period of millions, if not billions of years, the warp has become the dimension of unspace, filled with pure chaotic psychic energy that all of us are well aware. Back to the subject of warp storms. By using a series of specially made wards of my own design, I was able to directly study these chaotic nexuses on a structural depth, and after thorough scientific and psychic analysis, the results yielded are as follow. Warp storms can be used as a loosely resonating and magnifying psychic chamber. Through them, it is possible for a psyker to detect any and every emotion that a psyker experienced personally. Not only these emotions are detectable and distinguishable, but their origin point, the moment they enter the warp, is within reach. But how does this knowledge relate with chrono displacement? The overwhelming majority of emotions have their origin in normal space, which means they have a fixed origin point in time and space. When an emotion is created, it pierces and penetrates the warp instantaneously. While the laws of time and space do not normally apply on the warp, the moment of transference remains constant in normal space. While inside the vessel and surrounded by a warp storm, any psyker who is able to recollect a past emotion with great clarity can, with the proper ritual, use a warp storm to generate a connection between that same emotion and the moment when it originally entered the warp. Once connection is established and the psyker is re-experiencing that emotion, the vessel should then immediately jump back to normal space, and it will have traveled to the same time when the emotion was first created. This means that the psyker must also be a navigator, or the navigator must be keenly aware of the psyker's experience. Absolute synergy between psyker and navigator is paramount, or risk catastrophe in this endeavor, as any delay or time mismatch will fail in achieving a temporal path stable enough for safer travel. But if successful, once in real space, it will have traveled in time, and in time only, but not in space. Chrono displacement through this process was successfully executed by one individual named Antioch, who traveled 9 years back in time and sent a full and detailed report of his experiences. Such report will be presented in full on the upcoming lecture. This concludes this quick description.